In 1962, this was the threat that shocked the nation and the world. The introduction of Russian missiles on the island of Cuba, 90 miles from our coast, lying athwart the trade routes linking North and South America and the entrance to our Gulf ports. Strategically situated to disrupt the operations of the Panama Canal. But the United States had a trump card, Seapower. As Admiral Mahan wrote in 1890, to control the seas, it is necessary to have the power of offensive action, to be able to deny the enemy the use of the sea, and to close those highways to which commerce moves to and from the enemy's shores, and to use the seas for our own purposes. This is the essence of national strength at sea. In February 1964, the great new carrier America was launched. On that occasion, Paul H. Nitze, Secretary of the Navy, said,
"America is and always has been a maritime nation. Our export and import commerce is geared to a sea-based transportation system augmented by aircraft systems. Our defense posture is based largely on alliances with other maritime nations. Our commerce, our defense, and our very future are thus wedded to the effective use and control of the seas."
The roots of America's maritime strength go back to the days when the men and women who rode the Mayflower braved the bruising elements in search of freedom and opportunity. They settled in clearings that clustered along the Atlantic seaboard. And when danger threatened, the men of action who had learned their saltwater skills as whalers, fishermen, and traders became the sea rovers who helped to build a nation. Their names are known to the generations of their heirs. Thomas Truxtun, Stephen Decatur, Edward Preble, Isaac Hull, John Paul Jones, and they would leave a legacy to be long remembered, words to live by in the skirl of battle and the valleys of despair. I have not yet begun to fight. Don't give up the ship. In those early days, we had the men. We've always had the men. But our ships were few, and the opposition strong. George Washington was one of the first to voice the need for better ships and stronger fleets. He said,
"In any operation and under all circumstances, a decisive naval superiority is to be considered as a fundamental principle and the basis upon which every hope of success must ultimately depend."
Washington, with the help of a large French fleet, defeated Cornwallis at Yorktown, and we had won our independence. 20 years later, we found ourselves fighting the French on the high seas to retain our freedom. While we fought the French, the pirates of the Barbary States attacked our merchant ships, demanding tribute and holding American seamen for ransom. America's reply was, millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. At Tripoli, the United States Navy once more proved its courage and seamanship, and won new respect for the young nation. But our ships were still harassed by the English, who boarded our vessels to take American seamen they claimed to be British subjects. In 1812, American resentment exploded into war against Britain. We did not have the ships to match the English Navy, but our raiders and privateers played havoc with British merchantmen across all the ocean waters of the world. Still, we were not able to cut off the trade routes, nor restrict British ships from the seas. In the later years, much of our Atlantic coast was blockaded, and our own seaborne trade greatly reduced. The war ended with the Treaty of Ghent, December 24th, 1814, and the principle of the freedom of the seas was finally established. The years that followed from 1815 to 1860 saw only minor conflicts on the seas. And yet it was a time of tremendous changes in ships and weapons. The sail-driven ships moving at the whim of the winds gradually gave way to steam power. Although for many years the sails remained to supplement the primitive steam engines. Wooden hulls were soon to be ironclad, and muzzle-loading smooth bores would become longer-ranging, more accurate breech-loading rifles. Shot was replaced by shell. The tools of sea power were changing. But not until the American Civil War would these developments be really exploited. The most dramatic encounter of the war was the battle between the Union ironclad Monitor and the Confederate Merrimac in 1862. And for the next 40 years, ironclads were a powerful influence in ship design, both in the United States and overseas. Unable to meet the North in a battle of fleets, the South relied on hit-and-run tactics of privateers and commerce raiders. But the North had more ships and greater industrial capacity. And in the end, the Northern blockade of southern ports and river traffic assured the final victory by cutting the flow of materials needed to wage war. Before the end of the war, the United States Navy had 700 surface ships. But by 1870, the number had shrunk to less than 200. Only 52 of these were in full commission. While most political leaders and many naval men relied on our distance from Europe to keep us from war, other men began to question the security of our passive defense. In 1884, the Naval War College was established in Newport, Rhode Island, and Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan was selected as one of the instructors. As he prepared his lectures, he came to the conclusion that control of the seas was an historic factor that had never been systematically appreciated and expounded. This became his aim, to put into words the pattern and philosophy of sea power, based on the examples of modern maritime strategy and strength.
Sea power is more than naval power. It is the balanced strength of combat ships, weapons, auxiliary craft, commercial shipping, bases, and trained personnel. It is backed by industrial capacity and the character of a nation's people. Command of the sea assures its possessor of freedom to move upon it at all times and to deny its waters to enemy ships in the event of war. England, acting on these facts and dominating the trade routes to America, Africa, and Asia through the geographical position of our homeland and overseas bases, has become mistress of the seas.
Mahan saw similar advantages in the geography of the United States and the islands of Japan. He advocated a canal across Central America to stimulate Pacific commerce and to assure the United States control of a major American trade route. Mahan's books won a worldwide audience, especially in England, Japan, Germany, and France. America reacted more slowly. The prophet was slow to be honored in his own country. Fortunately, among his strongest supporters were Henry Cabot Lodge and Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt, who who used many of Mahan's ideas in forming national naval policy when he became president. It was Teddy Roosevelt who sent the Great White Fleet around the world to dramatize America's growing naval strength, who carved a canal across the Panamanian Isthmus to provide a new flexibility to our fleet. As early as 1896, Mahan had warned against the military continental ambitions of Germany. In 1914, the threat became an explosive fact in a war that for the first time would be waged in 3 dimensions: by surface ships, by light aircraft, by submarines. Admiral Mahan did not live to see his theories proved in World War I. His death came 4 months from the firing of the opening gun, the 100th anniversary of the Treaty of Ghent. In that same year, 1914, Carl Vinson was elected to his first term as a representative from Georgia. He would serve in the House longer than anyone in history, and in later years be known as the Admiral through his determined efforts to build the nation's oceanic strength. In 1914, America was unprepared for war. Too many people had believed our splendid isolation would keep us clear of European conflicts. But our complacency was soon torpedoed, along with many of our merchant ships on the high seas. Finally, while the English Navy tried to check our common foe, an aroused nation went into high gear to produce the ships and train the men to meet the unbelievable emergency. Germany had planned to win the war on land with a rigid strategy that failed to understand the necessity of sea support. But England quickly put Mahan's principles into action by blockading the German High Fleet, closing off the seas to warships and merchant vessels. Germany in desperation struck back with sea raiders and unrestricted submarine warfare. The success of German submarines almost cut England's sea communications. But the convoy system and other countermeasures reduced the submarine menace and restored Allied control. On land, the war came to a stalemate in the muddy trenches of the Western Front. But on the seas, Britain, bolstered by American and other seaborne allies, blocked essential war supplies from reaching Germany and destroyed its ability to continue the war. The only battle between the fleets was Jutland, where the German fleet, unable to break the British control of the seas, fled back to port. Superior British sea power had driven Germany from the seas. But America was quick to forget this lesson. With the war ended, our fleet again started to shrink. We relied once more on the fallacy of our splendid isolation. It was only the dedication of a few military and political leaders that prevented the complete decline of our national naval strength. Leading the fight was Carl Vinson, who had become chairman of the Naval Affairs Committee in 1931 and authored the famous Vinson-Trammell Act, which sparked the building of a 2-ocean navy. In 1964, one of his colleagues was to say, "No man has contributed more to improving our country's armed services and assuring the defense of our country than Chairman Vinson." In World War II, a major factor in Germany's defeat was the closing of her sea lanes. The British bottled up the German High Fleet in the North Sea, while Allied naval forces and air units gained control of the waters of the Mediterranean. Germany's major threat at sea was underwater warfare. Winston Churchill said, "The only thing that ever frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." For a time, the submarine offensive brought England to the brink of defeat until countermeasures turned the tide. Harbor, Japan proved it had absorbed the lessons of Mahan, an offensive initiative, and the concentration of power. The effectiveness of his teaching was written in smoke and flame. In sunken ships and sudden death. At first, we were on the strategic defensive. Then gradually our striking power grew. American submarines began slashing attacks on Japanese lines of communication. Then came the swift-moving task forces, spearheaded by carriers, and the extended striking force of naval air. Closely followed by the amphibious assault armadas. They were commanded by leaders who combined the philosophies of Mahan with the seamanship and courage of men who long ago had won the nation's independence. General Vandergrift on Guadalcanal. General Shoup on Tarawa. Raymond Spruance, commander of the Central Pacific. Mark Mitcher of Task Force 58, who turned the Marianas into a turkey shoot. Bull Halsey, whose third fleet in the Battle of Leyte Gulf destroyed the Japanese fleet as an effective fighting force. John McCain, Task Force 38, Okinawa. Mahan's principles of control of the seas and concentration of power were apparent as the American and Allied forces split the enemy fleets and beat them back on all sea fronts. Without control of the seas, with her fleet gone, her sources of supply shrunken, Japan no longer had the ability to carry on. The end of World War II and the introduction of the nuclear age has not changed the importance of the control of the seas. The force of sea power is mobile and varied enough to apply a wide range of pressures, from the deterring effect of visible presence to the launching of all-out nuclear retaliation. The communists have become increasingly aware of the value of sea power, of the ocean highways, and the sea control implicit in the strategic choke points of Panama, Suez, Gibraltar, and Malacca. They will take what they can get. They will take what we let them have. They will draw back if we show them we are not going to be buried a spadeful at a time. This was obvious in Korea. It was proved in the Cuban crisis. Today, the threat is not only military, but extends on many fronts in this cold, wet war. America can control the seas only by meeting the challenge in all arenas. We are exploring the valleys of the sea. Mapping the ocean's bottom and seeking new sources of food and minerals. New oceanographic ships flip on end to become floating laboratories. Strange craft ride on hydrofoils at surprising speeds. Amphibious vehicles cruise on cushions of air. We are exploring new techniques in marine assaults. Coordinating team skills and potentials for anti-submarine warfare. Launching carrier aircraft to hurtle across the sky at twice the speed of sound. Capable of hitting targets 1,000 miles inland. Nuclear-powered submarines have opened a new area of operation in the Arctic. And with our nuclear submarines has come the Polaris missile system. Dominant deterrent, unseen, on duty around the clock, accurate, and with ranges up to 2,500 nautical miles. With Polaris and carrier aircraft, almost every land target in the world is within reach from the sea. Nuclear energy, the power of the future, is already installed in some of our newest surface ships. The carrier Enterprise, the cruiser Long Beach, and the guided missile frigates Bainbridge and Truxtun. With nuclear power, our ships can go for years without refueling and are ready for action anywhere in the world. Among the greatest advantages of our naval strength is mobility. Always moving, easy to disperse, it offers no target to ballistic missiles. These moving communities of sea power are mobile bases that are not subject to the whims of local politics. They can be deployed over 3/4 of the Earth's surface, alert to any emergency. We live in a diminishing world. In 1522, Magellan circled the globe in 3 years. Now our nuclear ships can do it in less than 2 months. The barrier of sound is broken. Weapons of armor have changed. But the basic principles of sea power are still valid. We have always had the men to do the job. But in the uncertainty of this modern world, we need not only men, but also the most advanced achievements of naval science and technology to assure the responsive strength of United States sea power today and in the years ahead. There is no single answer to national security, but one indispensable part of any answer is control of the seas. Sea power, vigilant, resourceful, and responsive to the needs of free men in a free world.